All right, so my name is Jessica Regan. I am an instructor. I teach social service work at a local college here in Toronto. My background is in social work, and I specialize in intersectional mental health and wellness. So that means like facilitating conversations on mental health, racial inequalities, income inequalities, and basically getting like a holistic conversation about mental health and also social justice issues that affect marginalized populations. So I have those conversations like facilitated in a classroom, and then I also have those conversations through workshops and seminars I run online or in my community. I think a lot of my life has been shaped by a few different factors. I think one of them being I'm adopted, and I know that that definitely affected a lot of my inner dialogue and how I process the world around me, on top of just the dynamics of where I grew up, my home life, and how that affected how I kind of process things and also like respond to trauma. And I knew that at a young age I was very good at having difficult conversations with people at, I guess, high stakes. And when I say high stakes, it's often like the people we love the most, there's so much more to lose. So that was something I was really good at because I was having those conversations often. So I thought, okay, I could be a teacher, be like a gym teacher, or I was like, maybe I'll be like a therapist or something. And then I found myself in a social work program, and it was amazing because it talked about social justice, and I think as someone who needed to be advocated for often, being able to advocate for others is a gift, and I think it does a lot of reclaiming of like my own soul. So because of that, it kind of forced me into this career of education and healing, and yeah. It definitely helps me. I also know part of my journey and my work is learning what's helping others helping me, or is it just helping others? Because I think a lot of times like intent is super important. And when I'm helping others, it feels phenomenal, but a lot of the work that I've had to do and a lot of the people I have conversations with is we have to make sure if we're doing the work that our cup is full before we even start having those conversations. Because if you're pouring from an empty cup, sometimes like the effort that you're putting into helping these people can become, it's no longer cathartic, and it's not even helping the person that you're trying to facilitate a journey of growth with. So it's definitely like a balance that I'm always trying to uphold and make sure that I'm always showing up in a place where it's helpful. And I think that's a lot of the conversations I have in my workshops and in my classroom about always kind of being aware of how you show up. I think that there definitely needs to also be a lot more like a collective understanding and also a collective value and appreciation for responsibility. And I think that if the teachers create an environment where students know it's their responsibility to look after their mental health, not to say that your mental health's not important, but you should be aware of your own threshold so that I can recognize it in you and do what I can to help you. And I think that responsibility starts with having things like you said, New View, where people have active conversations about their mental health with their peers. Because if you're not having it with your peers, what's the likelihood of you having it with a professional? And like that's like the first step, that's your first circle. And I think that is crucial in any education, workplace environment, wherever. I grew up in a lot of chaos. So I, as an adult, had to do a lot of work on understanding why chaos feels so comfortable when it's like not necessarily normal. And I think as a teenager, that chaos kind of caught up with me. On top of like the dynamics of where I grew up, I was the only person of color in my high school. Everyone else was like, I don't say Barbie, but like a lot of my peers were thin, white, young women. And I did not look like that. I had like big legs, I was really athletic, I had dark skin, I had like different hair, I was so different. on top of like the other chaos going on with what I was experiencing in like my family life. And that started showing up initially as like disordered eating. And I battled with bulimia when I was younger. And I think that also had layers of depression. And when I was like 16 or 17, I was like, okay, maybe I should go speak to someone. So I went and spoke with my doctor. And my doctor just prescribes me like antidepressants. Doesn't ask me anything, just says, here are some antidepressants. I go home and my family, we were already kind of having surface level conversations about mental health because of the dynamics of my family. And I remember, my dad had explained some of the side effects, and my dad had more of a conversation with me about these pills than my doctor. But at the moment, I didn't want to listen because there were so many things going on at home that I was like, whatever. So, I took them. I had one session with the counselor. And I remember that this really impacted me for most of my life. I sat down with the social worker, and she looks at me and she goes, oh, you're so self-aware. I don't think you're depressed. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm also coming here telling you that I've been self-harming and I'm feeling isolated. So yeah, if I can articulate myself well, that doesn't diminish what I'm experiencing. And she tells me, oh, I'm actually changing offices. We'll reach out to you for your next appointment. Never calls me back. And after that, I had a really difficult year where I was severely depressed. I was taking these antidepressants with no professional help or support. And my depression got worse, got a lot worse, to the point where I was actively suicidal. And eventually one day I kind of woke up and I was like, I don't want to take these pills anymore. I'm so bad at taking them to begin with because I'm a kid and I'm not taking my vitamins every day before this. Why would I remember to take my antidepressants if I have never been educated on why you should take them properly? And I just stopped taking them and things started getting a little bit better. And then I went away to school and the same thing started coming up again. And it took me a while to realize that I have PTSD, so I definitely react to triggers in a way that is cyclical. And now as an adult, I try to identify that I have the tools and the capacity to overcome my triggers in a way that serves who I want to be. So that means not acting out as if I'm a child anymore because I was never in an environment where I could ask for my needs to be met. And then identifying when you're self-sabotaging and identifying when you're getting into a disordered self-image and learning that you have the tools and the education and the ability to see that life is so complex and you have this plethora of people to support you and you have the education to identify when you need help and identify when maybe you're just actively choosing things that are easy. It's a lot easier to choose coping mechanisms that you used as a child or as a teenager because those are survival mechanisms and you're just doing the best you can. But as an adult, we have a choice sometimes to stop and reflect and think maybe there's another way to do it. A lot of when I did go to therapy, a lot of the therapy I did was mirrored a lot of CBT and narrative work. And because of how I use a very strength-based approach, which means in social work is everyone has tools or strengths that they use that help them overcome situations that they may not even realize are strengths. And I'm definitely very critical of myself. And that's a skill that I have that allows me to see things kind of differently in my work. And I try to use that skill in myself by doing things like thought recognition. So if I can catch myself having cyclical thoughts that are rooted in abandonment, I use that cynical criticism as a way to empower me to dissect my thoughts and think, okay, is there evidence to prove that what you're thinking is or feeling is rooted in facts? Is there evidence to show that maybe you're feeling not listened to, or you're feeling alone, or you're feeling like really down on yourself. And what I actively do is have conversations with myself, kind of navigating my reality. And I think the work that I had to do was acknowledge that the way I see the world is very, I guess, impacted by my own experiences. So I'm filtering things that reaffirm how I have low self-esteem, or I'm filtering things that reaffirm that eventually I'm going to get abandoned again. And I need to do the work to remember, hey, Jessica, you're looking through a filter right now. Part of what you're seeing and experiencing is not actually real. It's just reaffirming these limited beliefs that you have about yourself. And I'm going to have conversations with myself about what's real and what's not. And then usually at the end of that conversation, I'm able to feel a little bit more self-soothed and be like, okay, you know, of this whole piece of pie, maybe 60% of this was not actually true. It was just me reacting from a trigger. And then now I can deal with 40% of the problem, and it seems so much more manageable. One of the quotes that I like to use or I think about often is like, be active in the pursuit of what sets your soul on fire. And for me, that means actively showing up for myself and living in my truth, which means I am flawed, I am not perfect, but I'm abundant in worth by just existing and existing alone. And that me showing up and just being who, being who I am is enough. And that as long as I remember that reality is as real to me as it is to other people, and that those realities aren't always going to match up, to empower me to know that it's never really that serious, and that as long as I know my truth, I'm able to stand firm and not take everything around me as either an attack or as something that devalidates my existence, and that my existence can react and coexist with other people, and it doesn't defer how I am as a person. And by doing that, I can actively do things that make me use my strengths and use my vision and values to empower me to do what I want to do with my life, which is help others, have conversations, decolonize educational spaces, and make room for non-traditional voices.